The number one issue for us, as we understand, and the importance of selling is twofold. One is that people really get a bit uncomfortable when you say, I'm trying to sell something. Right. So there's a hesitation around the word sales and sort of a preconception that when you sell something, it feels a little bit like going to buy a used car at a used car lot in downtown Joburg, Nairobi, or wherever you are. Right. So that's a myth that we can dispel. We all influence, we all build great relationships, we all deliver in a way that makes sense, and we all want to do that in a strategically valuable way. If that's what selling is, then I think we can just take away the stereotype around that. And the other one, which we want to dispel right up front, is that there's one way to sell. There isn't. So as you are selling a nuclear power station or a used car or coaching, that process will look slightly different. And the way that you approach it needs to be slightly different and can be unique to you. So there's a couple of really reassuring messages I can give you. One is sales doesn't have to be selling used cars. It can really be building a great trusted advisor relationship where you could add strategic value. The second one is you don't have to reinvent yourself and become another person to sell. If you know your strengths and what you're potentially good at, you can be very effective in that space. And Margriet and myself are really great partners in this. I bring a very different lens to the selling process. She brings a relationship capacity, and together we can really build great impact for our clients. So we're going to talk today about selling by building on who you are. There is nothing worse in our mind than saying, in order to sell or be a manager or a rocket scientist or whatever role that you try to fulfill, that you have to copy somebody else because you're not that person. And so our approach to development is always about celebrating who you are and helping you be the best version of yourself. And if you're intentional in that space and know how to use that, you're going to be effective from a sales perspective or any type of role basis that you may have. Just by way of introduction about who we are. So the Being Human Group, we're an award-winning Gallup strategic licensee. So in other words, think a little bit about us as a strength one-stop shop. We have received a number of awards, so I can show off a little bit about that. And what our aim and mission in life is, we really want to empower people, positively disrupt workplaces, and change the way people lead by using the science of strengths. So when we think about leading, we think sales is a leading type of process, and we'll talk a little bit about how we can help you with that. So what are we going to cover today? And we always like to do these things and give you some practical stuff, right? So light on theory, lots on the practice side, because I think that's really where the value of the session lies. So we're going to talk a little bit about fact or fiction about sales, and you guys are going to give me a bit of a steer. Some key principles that we think underpins all selling. How to think about sales impact, the sales cycle and thinking about your strengths, bringing that all together from a strength and sales point of view. And then we're going to show you a practical sales tool that we like to use that gives us sort of the answer to world peace when it comes to selling and what you could do in that space. So that's the agenda for the afternoon, and we can take it from there. For those that are not experienced in strengths, just to give you a bit of a highlight, Gallup has the Clifton Strength Assessment. It looks at 34 themes or talents that naturally occur in a human population. And when you do the assessment, you will see that it'll tell you where your dominant talents lie, either in the execution space, the strategic thinking space, the relationship, or the influencing space, or combinations of those, and we'll refer to those as we go along. So fact or fiction, let's ask you this question. It is stereotypically the case that people believe only extroverts make the best salesperson or the best salespeople. So there is a mythology that only extroverts can sell. That's not the case. We've seen some incredibly introverted people that can build great one-to-one relationships. They build trust. They connect in a way that is deep and meaningful to the person that they're working with, even if it's on a one-to-one basis, in such a way that customer will not go anywhere else. You also then get people that stand up and make a room of 50 potential customers and turn them into 50 different leads. Horses for courses, different folks, depending on your strength profile. So here are some key principles that we think are really important that are often lost in the sales development process. This is not just us that thinks this. This is what Gallup says. There is no one right way to sell. Salespeople get the best results by building on who they already are. And here's the reality check. Think about the last time you engaged with a salesperson and ask yourself the question, why did you trust that or connect with that person or felt that you would want to part with your hard-earned cash with that person? And it's not because they were mirroring you, telling you what you wanted to hear. It's because they were believable, authentic to themselves, and understood what your needs are. And then the other point that we often forget, our customers are humans, right? So they have their own foibles. They have their own sort of dominance or way that they like to think about things or where they want to lean. Some of our customers, for example, just want delivery. Their execution, they just want to tick off stuff and they want us to crack on. Other clients want to really engage with us and build a relationship with us so that they truly understand whether we get them as human beings. And they will never, you'll never be able to close with them without that relationship being very close. Margriet, we've got one of those great strengths called individualization. She's able to intuitively understand where somebody else is coming from and what their needs might be, and she's able to build a relationship on that. I can achieve the same thing, but I use other strengths. I can use my strategic, my ideation, my learner, my curiosity mechanism. It doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there. And so other clients just want to be influenced. They want to understand whether you are going to offer them something market leading. They want to be led. You need to influence them. And then still others are very analytical and they want to look at different options and strategic thinking or insights. And one of the tricks around selling, I think, is about being able to very quickly ascertain where your customer sits. Which area, what are their needs are as human beings? Because if you miss the humanity of it, Vessels was talking about listening, for example, or Margriet's individualization and so on. Man, this is going to be like pushing a rock up a hill. And so before I think of even selling, I think it's about recognition, respecting, acknowledge the human being that you're working with there. And they will tell you and give you insight as to how to connect around the sale. So the two key principles we think is mission critical, which is quite different to a lot of the sales development stuff that we've seen, is there's no one right way to sell. There's a sales process, and we'll show you some of the steps, and you've seen that before, but there's no one right way to do that from our perspective. Salespeople get the best results by building on who they already are, because if you can talk authentically, I think you sell better. And then, of course, this key concept, customers are humans. Now, I always love it when I say that because it's something that, well, of course they're humans, but we seldom acknowledge. So when we think about doing this, in other words, selling from who we are, and we think about it from if I have these strengths, how do I use them? What is the impact? The Gallup research in this arena is unequivocal. For those that are use a strength-based approach, in other words, identify what their natural talents are and develop those, see a 10 to 19% increase in sales, a 14 to 29% increase in profit because we're offering better solutions, a 3 to 7% higher customer engagement, and a 9 to 15% increase in engaged employees. So if you're running a sales team, for example, using a strength-based approach is just so much more effective. And the psychology of this, I think everybody intuitively gets, right? Which is this. If I know what Margriet potentially is good at, we develop that and we build a sales process around that to connect with clients, she is going to be far more effective in that space than if we just try and apply a sales process regardless of those factors. And very similarly, I'm in the same boat. You can see my top 5 strengths behind me. My dominance is in execution and strategic thinking. And the way that I like to sell is to build the confidence with the client that I can be a trusted advisor that can deliver. So I sell best when I can sell solutions, I can connect with individuals, and I can give them the promise that we will deliver on the value that we are proposing. And you'll notice all salespeople have their own sales narrative around what they really do well. And when you think about yourself as a salesperson, ask this power question. What am I naturally good at in the sales world that if I ramp or turn that volume up, I'm going to be significantly more successful? How can I do things that I don't particularly enjoy? For Makrit, it's cold calling, but man, is she deadly in the social media space? And if you pick up the phone, she is going to connect with you in ways that you think that she's family, right? And that gives her the energy to keep going, because we all know cold calling is not a lot of fun. So let's think a little bit about the sales cycle. We all know that if you want to really think about engaging the customer, you notice that we're not saying selling to the customer, we're saying engaging with the customer. And so for us, selling is always about customer need, short and long term. I think that's such an important lens, the short and long term, thinking about engaging the customer. Before you can sell, the customer must realize that you exist, right? This idea that they can and want to talk to you is about you connecting with them in a way that makes sense to them. Remember, the customer is a human. And so it's about prospecting. Are you a relator who loves the one-to-one intimacy of going one person at a time, getting a referral from their friends, and so building up this network of great customers? Or are you somebody that has a lot of influence, that likes standing out at the podium, like we're going to do at the HR Summit next week, and talk to hundreds of our best friends or soon to be best friends about strengths development? Or are you like Makrit, individualization and social media and connectivity, or all of the above? The second one is once you begin to engage with the customers around assessing the opportunity. And you're never going to get the customer to unlock the opportunity for you unless you have a great set of sales questions. Value. What are you trying to achieve? What is your need? And so on. Then it's about identifying solutions. We very seldomly advocate one size fits all. So we're always about slightly customizing and really putting our products and services into a basket that people can understand in relation to themselves. Building advocacy. In other words, if your client is the decision maker or they're not the decision maker, how can you get to the decision maker? How can you build internal champions for what you're trying to do? And so there's something about selling on value. Negotiating and closing, man, if you do all the stuff right, closing is not too difficult. Having said all that, we are seeing in the market people taking an incredibly long period of time to make a decision. That might have nothing to do with how good you are as a salesperson. It's just sometimes the market can be hard because people are busy and it's hard to get into their diaries, and they just maybe just too afraid to make a decision. And then more importantly is getting business is great. Getting returning business is even better. So delivering on your promises, serving, retaining, and growing becomes mission critical. Pretty typical sales cycle. Most people would recognize versions of this and have seen quite a lot of this. But what's missing here is the insight around strengths. The insight around strengths would say something like this, is how I use my unique strengths or talents in prospecting is going to look slightly different to how I'm going to use assessing the opportunity or identifying the solutions and building advocacy. They would require different strength combinations from me, keeping in mind that I'm still going to be the person I am. I'm not asking you to do anything different to what you can, but you can't just use the same approach for all of those steps and think that you're going to get great results. Prospecting requires a different strength combination than assessing opportunity, identifying solutions, building advocacy, and so forth. Why is that? because we want to engage the client as a human before we identify their need and close around that. So let's give you a classic example of how to do this. So I'm going to take prospecting. It seems to be the people's biggest bugbear. And let's take cold calling as an example, because most people have a reticence, to annoy strangers and start to talk to them about their products and services and what they do, because sometimes it could just a little bit awkward, right? Some people are great at it. You can see them when you're standing outside an elevator or a lift and they push the button and there are 5 people standing there, and they just naturally, by the end the lift door opens, they know all 5 people's names, they know their numbers, and they just are naturally good at that. The rest of us stand there with a mouthful of teeth and we don't ever want to get into somebody else's personal space. But that's what cold calling is all about, is that connecting in that personal space where sometimes it can feel just a bit awkward. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a secret insight to me. I have no relationship strengths in my top 10, right? So I'm not going to be the guy at the elevator or in an airplane and strikes up a conversation with random strangers. I would rather stab myself in the eye with a rusty pin, right? So how do I think about my strengths in terms of prospecting? Because, I can't naturally do that. So I'll give you a good example. My most dominant strength is achiever. So when I think about prospecting, I don't think about it as relationship. I think about it as a task and a challenge. So that takes the fear out of it. So what I do every single week in my calendar, Marita has access, she sees it, is I go, look, I'm going to speak to 20 people. That's my challenge. I'm going to crack through that and we're going to get it done. And I set that up as a plan, and I use my achiever strength to drive that with intensity. And I celebrate every single afternoon. Marita and myself have a conversation, and I say, I spoke to 6 people today. 6 great new prospects. We're engaging. This is what I think we could do with them. This is how I'm going to follow up. So I'm going to use my achiever and strategic together to really bring that to fruition. And so what you could do is you can take each one of those sales cycles and you stick that into this little template here. You put that into prospecting. You look at what your strengths are. Now, if you haven't done your Clifton Strength Assessment, not all is lost, right? Think a little bit about, most people are pretty self-aware. Think a little bit about where your dominance lies. Are you naturally the go-getter, executor? Are you the influencer? Are you the relationship builder? Are you the guy that thinks, the analytical, the strategic thinker, or combinations of that? You can play this game and use this template quite easily, intuitively as well. And so what does that look like in a practical sense for me? So if I look at this, so for me, when I build my achiever strength in the sales space, what I do is I set time on my calendar to meet with customers, whether they know they're customers or not. I meet with as many customers as I can each week. So this achiever really is good at driving prospecting volume. I leave my sales agenda in the office and I just connect. My task is to connect. And so I'm going to use my achiever to intentionally meet as many people in my customer zone as possible. And I'm just going to connect with them. That's the job, is to connect. Because I don't have relationship strengths, I'm not going to do it in the same way Mahrit does it, with individualization and so on. I have to listen very intensely. I have to be very aware of what the customer needs, and I need to think that through in order to make that time valuable for them. Because here's the reality in prospecting. Meeting with customers fosters trust, builds rapport, and gives you a better understanding of their needs. And here's my selling superpower. If there's one thing that stands out, is my learner. My learner is, yes, I like learning and I like new stuff and all that, but my learner is my curiosity mechanism. And Margriet often gets a little annoyed with me because when I start and we start to talk to somebody, I'll have 27 questions to ask that person because I want to know, right? Who are you? Where do you come from? How does this work? Oh, that's interesting, and so forth. And by the end of that, I'll have the same individualization result that Margriet uses. She just uses it from a relationship building perspective. And that's the key thing. I'm going to use my achiever to meet as many people to understand their needs. Now notice I'm understanding needs before selling. Once I understand needs, I then understand what solution I can put into place. And because I've already connected with them, they should be willing to listen. And the way that keeps my energy motivation going, because hey, listen, when you prospect, you get told no as much as you get told yes, is that every meeting for me is an achievement. I can tick it off from my diary, job done. Man, it just, because I in the execution space, it just energizes and keeps me going way beyond others who probably have wilted being told no for the 17th time. For me as an achiever, no just means not now. So I'll come back and ask you again, because I don't have any relationship aspects at stake. Obviously, from our point of view, you can do this intuitively, or you can really just use the Clifton Strength Assessment to understand your and identify your natural talents. Because obviously, the more you know about what you bring to the table, the easier it is to develop and connect with those customers that you have identified as important. And that's really what the Clifton Strength Assessment does. We're going to show you a version of it, which is the Clifton Strengths for Sales report. And it's a report particularly that links your natural traits as a salesperson with the sales cycle as we described it, and gives you great insight about how you can use your strengths to be much more effective in the sales space. So inside your report, if you look at your Clifton Strength for Sales report, what it does is to give you a couple of really great insights. It first of all tells you your top 10 themes. So we've just, in our background, we've just given you our top 5 and so on, but the top 10. And those are your natural dominant talents or traits that you can use in order to be more effective in your role, be a better version of who you are, and then of course apply to the sales process. You'll notice that there are different colors on your top 10, and that would be the categories or the domains. We've talked about executing, we've talked about influencing, we've talked about relationship building and strategic thinking, and all of us are interesting combinations of that. Obviously, the report will give you a bit of insight on how to use it, and then mission critically, it gives you a resource to accomplish your goals. So think about that the very simple achiever example I've just shown you previously. I did the achiever example. Mahrit gave you a little bit around individualization, but in the report itself, it sets you up in terms of being able to put your aspect or whatever aspect you're working off in the sales cycle. It allows you to put your strengths there, and gives you sort of great questions as to how you can start to think about your strengths in relation to the sales process that you have put in place. So it's a fantastic resource to help you accomplish your goals. So let's just give you a practical example. I always like practical examples of how this works. Say, for example, you had significance as as a dominant trait. Significance is in the yellow or orange domain, depending on how you see colors. It's an influencing category. And so what is significance? Significance is you want to make a big impact. That's why it's influential. You're independent and prioritize projects based on how much influence they will have on your organization or the people around you. So how can this theme or talent contribute to sales success? I'm just going to use my annotate here to help us with that. Well, first of all, it gives you a clue that significance, you bring an enterprising energy that comes with this, an energy that can be, if it's positive, very powerful around activating others. Now you can start to see why that could be quite important if you have this trait in the sales world. And typically we say makes you fit in a sales role quite significantly. You're an independent spirit, so you have that locus where you can go out and get things done. You're willing to take risks. You're a natural influencer who embraces the responsibility for meeting your goals. So you can understand why this fits in nicely with the sales process. Your success in sales is fueled by your aspirations. So significance and really driven about making an impact to others. So when people with, when people with significance sell, They think about how can I help the client significantly impact the world around them in a way that makes sense to them. So they're often the go big or go home guys, right? They'll go, "Preet, this idea of individualization is interesting, but how can we individualize strengths for all 54 countries in Africa?" Would be the type of sales conversation they would have with a Mahrit. You notice it's quite different to how Mahrit operates as a salesperson or how I drive volume with connections. This is about, listen, we're going to change the world, the Greta Thunberg of sales, if I can put it that way. And your aspiration, passion, and determination to continuously excel in hitting and exceeding your sales goals. That's great if it works well and you're using it appropriately, but sometimes strengths can also be misused. And what I love about the report is it also tells you how this theme can get in the way of your success. So if you're overusing it or underusing it or not using it appropriately, because, hey, if I'm trying to sell a strength-based solution to Mahrit for all 54 African countries, this may be overwhelming to her. Right? So it's a little bit about judging your volume. And so how can this, you tend to associate with the most prestigious prospects. By doing so means you may miss worthwhile but less prestigious prospects. These lesser known prospects could give you the chance to make significant difference to those who need your product or service the most. So sometimes significance can blind you to what we call the meat and potatoes client, the ones that keep the lights and water running every single day, that are maybe not sexy, but still there's value there. So sometimes significance can have that blind spot where we exclude people or exclude opportunities or miss opportunities that may not be as prestigious as running strengths campaign on 54 countries. Maybe we start with running a strength campaign in Cape Town or Pretoria or Bloemfontein, for example. And then what we love about the report is this notion that it gives us the application, is how to apply each one of the themes to you as a salesperson. I've just given you one example here, and that's really because the space constraints. But sometimes, so if you think a little bit about that, somebody with significance can show customers the way to achieving higher goals. When you position your solution as the answer to reaching their goals, your customers will be more successful and your customers can take inspiration. So this is often when you start, the customer needs 2 or 3 things. By the time you have solved the vision of all 54 countries in our example, they may be inspired and energized to do more. And so what's great about the sales report is for each of your top 10, where your dominance, your natural talent lies, they would have the definition, how this theme can contribute to your success, how it can get in the way of your success, and again, how to apply significance as a salesperson. So if we go back, for example, to the little wheel of fortune I showed you, and remember I had prospecting and achiever, you can start to see that the application part of the report will tell you what to do for each step of the sales cycle. You will obviously, from your experience and knowing yourself, add to that, but it gives you a great place to start to connect sales, the sales cycle, and your client as a human being. And the proof is in the pudding. By doing this and really being intentional in the space, right? So let's just stop there about intentionality. Intentionality for us is really applying what you're doing. You can't just go, well, I have these 5 strands or 10 strands, and I'm just going to intuitively wish that they are going to work. No. You got to really be intentional, have that plan in place, make sure that you really have worked through the connections well, and you hold yourself accountable for driving that. If you do that, the following happens. There's 11% higher volume and a 6% higher closing percentage on average for salespeople who receive strength coaching. In other words, use this as a process to help themselves sell better. A 10 to 19% increase in sales, and 6 times as likely to say they get to do what they do best. Many sales managers that we work with always say the following to me: how do I get my guys to sell? How do I keep them energized, engaged, and motivated to sell? Because, it's really hard out there. And we acknowledge that it is really hard out there. But when you're playing to your strengths, you're playing to who you naturally are. That's your authentic space. You're 6 times as more likely to be motivated and engaged. And when we think about engagement, this is about discretionary effort. This is about the effort that goes beyond just your normal 8 to 5. And this is about driving the performance agenda. The assumption that we make is the salespeople, you that are selling, you're motivated to sell because that's important to you. It's important to your business or your salespeople. It's important to them. Obviously, this does not account for those that don't like to sell, but have found them in sales role, and they really shouldn't be there. That's a different type of question. So when you align strengths, and you intentionally align strengths with a sales cycle, you're looking at 11% higher volume and 6% higher closing percentage, 10 to 19% increase in sales, and 6 times as likely to say that they get to do what they do best. What's fantastic for the sales manager is if you understand the strengths of your team, you can look at the strength pattern for the team, and you can delve in and think and connect with each person in your team individually in a way that you can start to think about, how can I help this person use their strengths to sell better? And so you go from a sales manager that pushes numbers to a sales manager that develops their individual salespeople to be the best salesperson that person can be, and the numbers stack up. So rather than push, we're looking at a pull when it comes to sales management. The great tool that comes with the sales report, if you have a big team, for example, we can put we can map the strengths onto a team grid, and so you can start to see whether your sales team is naturally executing, influencing, relationship, or strategic thinking, or that type of combination. You can start to think about how that matches with your prototypical client and how that can link to every step of the sales cycle that we have shown you today.